My name is Karen Hughes, and I'm the Domestic Violence Clinical Service Coordinator at the Life Crisis Center. And I want to welcome you to the Life Crisis Center today. And with me is Donna LeFew. She is the Clinical Director for the Life Crisis Center. Hi, Donna, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
And today we're going to be talking about suicide. That's a big topic. It's a rough topic.
Yeah, it's pretty tough.
What is the scope of suicide?
Suicide is a complex problem that affects most people in some way or form or another. In this country, there's over 327 million people. And of that, going by the 2016 census, there were over 45,000 suicides. Now, those are suicides that were confirmed. So when we look at the scope of the problem, we're looking at probably 5 to 25% more of actual suicides. Now, those are the kinds of deaths that is suspected but can't be confirmed. Beyond that, if you look at expanding it, I like to think of an iceberg. It's the tip of the iceberg. Even below that is like 40 to 100 times that number is the number of people with suicidal behaviors, so attempts.
Wow.
And we believe in the year 2016 there were more than 16 million people with thoughts of suicide.
Just thoughts.
Yeah, thoughts. Wow. So what we know is that when someone dies by suicide, it impacts a family, it impacts a community. When there's a celebrity, it even expands globally, where people are, deeply impacted by that death. So I think most of us can, in some way have been either whether someone close to us or someone that we know has struggled with the death, the loss of someone by suicide.
Right. So you have those that had died by suicide that we know of. We've had those that were that died, but it could have been suicide, but it wasn't confirmed. And then we have all the thoughts and attempts. That's big.
Right.
Given that it is such a big problem, what should somebody, like if it's somebody that I know, what should we look for?
What I would suggest is that we look for things that, we either see, we hear, or we sense. And when I say sense, I mean that gut feeling. And really people need to pay attention to that, because most people have a pretty good gut instinct. But in terms of what you might see behaviors that are not characteristic for that person, or talk that reflects hopelessness, or being a burden to other people, statements about needing to escape or giving up, unbearable pain, things like that people might say, like, I can't take it anymore. If that person is someone who typically says that and that's just their part of their vernacular, it's not concerning. But when it's something that a person doesn't typically say and they say that, we need to pay attention to that and pay attention to our gut if we think that something's not quite right.
So are there anything like life events that might put people at risk for suicide?
That is actually a good point. There are things that put people at greater risk that they experience, like the rejection or loss. Prior suicide attempts can also put a person at risk. Prolonged stress, abuse, and mental health problems. All of these things can contribute. In addition to that, a life event where someone close to them or someone in their family has died by suicide can increase the risk. It becomes more familiar. So folks that have had that experience, we just need to pay attention, because that can, truly increase their risk for dying by suicide.
So if I think I'm having my friend or my family member, my gut's talking, what should I do?
Well, the very best thing that you can do if you really think something's going on, in addition to like things that you hear them say, maybe even some behaviors, depression, isolation, reckless behaviors, things that are just out of characteristic, a change in behavior, increased alcohol and drug use, that gut's telling you something's wrong, you need to ask the question about suicide. Directly and clearly, like, are you thinking of suicide? This is a really important thing because so many people, even seasoned professionals, don't feel comfortable with saying the word suicide or asking, are you thinking of suicide? They either feel like it's uncomfortable, or they're like afraid that if they say the word suicide, they're going to suggest to someone that that's something that they should do, which is absolutely 100% a myth. So when we're sensing something or hearing something, feeling something's not quite right, we just need to be very bold and say, you know, hey, are you thinking of suicide? This often can be prefaced with reasons why you're thinking that, you know, so you don't just out, you know, kind of say it out of the blue, just kind of like a surprise. Like, well, I'm noticing that, you know, you're not yourself. You've withdrawn from your friends, and you're saying some things that really concern me. I'm wondering if you're thinking of suicide. Something as simple as that. Easier said than done. People struggle with it, and sometimes you might just have to practice saying it, but it'll save a life. The worst thing that can happen is somebody just laugh at you and say, of course not. But the best thing that can happen is you can save a life, or if they ever have that situation where they're thinking about suicide in the future, they know you are someone that they can go to, that you're not afraid of talking about it. So it's really a win-win. We all just sort of need to get over the stigma and the shame around the word and be able to talk openly about it.
Yeah. So if they do say yes, that I am thinking about it, what then?
The very best thing you can do in that moment is to listen, to ask them what is going on, because there's a reason. They're in unbearable psychic pain at that point. And most people don't give the gift of listening, and it is the very greatest gift you can give in that moment. We know from, you know, studies about people who have attempted suicide and survived, that most of them, 80% or greater, say that the one thing that they felt was that nobody understood them and no one cared. So when you give the gift of listening, you are taking care of that. You are showing them that you care enough to listen and sit with them in their pain, and you really can understand and attempt to understand what they're going through. So it just simply starts with things like, you know, can you tell me what's going on that's got you in this place? I'm so sorry. You know, just letting them, giving them permission, and then using some good listening skills, not, you know, texting and checking email, but, you know, eye contact, soft eyes, and just staying there. If you're freaking out, it's really important to kind of keep that in. I think sometimes what happens is when we hear somebody that we care about say, yeah, actually, I am thinking about suicide, we tend to be like, panic. No, you can't do that. What are you talking about? That's crazy. You can't leave me. You can't leave your children. You can't, and all that sort of thing. And that's understandable why somebody would feel that way. It's natural, but, you know, when we educate ourselves to say, you know, that's not really the best approach. If we can just sit with them in that moment and do the listening, well, there's time for all the other. But in that moment, if we skip over that, you know, if somebody's feeling powerless or helpless, that just perpetuates that feeling. You're not listening to what's going on with them. So it's like, see, nobody really does care, or nobody understands. So they may tell you what you want to hear if you go into that mode, and tell you that they're going to be okay because they've seen that panic. But, you know, they're at greater risk at that moment then, because they're just they might go back, and when they're alone, you know, engage in suicidal behavior.
But if I do have that panic and the other person senses it, can I say anything to acknowledge?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you just let them know, like, you know, I'm sorry, I was just concerned, and it scares me. The thought of losing you is really scary for me. I'm so sorry. Tell me what's going on. Why, you know, what got you to this point? I want to know more.
So acknowledge that they're seeing me reacting, but also I'm going to be there for them. Okay.
Yeah, it's really important, critical. So it's so important that I would almost say magical, because it lets off pressure, emotional pressure. I like to think of the pressure cooker. You know, my grandmother had one of those that would, and I know we were told not to pop the lid because there would be a big explosion. I was terrified of the thing. But it's, you know, releasing that emotional stuff is like that. You know, a little bit, just a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. And so many things go on when the person's telling their story. They're hearing it out loud for the first time. They may not have even realized how much danger they were in. So it's kind of like the cold water in the face. Like, and then, you know, beyond that, they're hearing it out loud. You're being able to show that you're somebody who cares about them. And sometimes that release of all that emotional stuff is enough to help them just be in a better place and to go on another day and really move them out of suicidality. We need to check in with that, of course. We don't just let somebody talk and then, leave it at that. But a lot of times that isn't just enough that they need to be able to feel like they can go on.
Right. So instead of panicking, just meet them where they are. And acknowledge where they are. And then, then what? I mean, how do you move them past that so that maybe doing some problem solving or what to do next?
Right. So in that step, we're good you brought that up, but we're not doing the problem solving because when we, shift to that very quickly again, like I said, they don't feel understood or heard.
You don't want to start there.
But once you've provided that for them, maybe they're more apt to say that they're willing to work with you on how to stay safe.
Okay.
People are trained in how to do an intervention, and certainly on a little, 15 or 20 minute segment, we can't go into how to do an intervention. There are people in the community that are trained to do so. So connecting someone with someone who's trained to do an intervention at that point, it's the safety planning and the follow-up and all of that. But the main thing is that you don't leave that person alone. So, might want to talk to them about their resources, who's in their life, who do they trust, and who can we get to partner with us to make sure that person's not left alone as long as they're having the suicidal ideation. Sometimes a person is in such a bad state and it doesn't shift and they can't be safe at all. We might have to get emergency services involved. Might be they may need to go to the emergency room. They may not need that type of response, but they might have a mental health professional or someone who has been trained that they know and that they've worked with. If they've had prior attempts, that can make them more at risk. So, but the good news is with that is that if there's been a prior attempt, they've survived, then we can say what worked before, what helped before. That can be good information. But the main thing is not to leave that person alone. There are lots of resources. We also, the Life Crisis Center has the 211 line as well as the National Suicide Line, but 211 has a crisis specialist at the other end that's been trained in ASSIST, which is Acquired Suicide Intervention Skills Training. So that's the person who knows how to move it to, the reasons to live, the safety planning, and how to schedule follow-up.
Right. So if it's just me and I'm with this person, just making sure that they're not alone, or who are they going to have until they can get some help? Like a family member or a friend, be with them, and then maybe getting them hooked up with a mental health in some way.
Right. Because, they can call. A person that's helping someone could actually, a lot of people don't feel real comfortable using the phone or feel very intimidated by a crisis line. So, a helper could call the line for them, get the conversation started, and pass it over. Little things like that can really make a difference. Even when the support is gone, it's nice to know that there's a crisis line that the person can talk to, the person on the other end confidentially 24 hours a day. So at 2 a.m. often, when it's dark out and there's nothing to distract us, things can seem so big and, just need to have that human connection. So that's helpful in that way too.
So what other resources are there?
In terms of suicide information, there's a lot of information on the internet. Locally, we have an organization called the Jesse Klump Foundation that has a website called Jesse's Paddle. That can be found at jessespaddle.org. And on there, you can get information from groups for people who have family members who've died by suicide, so loss survivors. There is information on how to volunteer, local events to get involved in. So it's a wealth of information. In addition to that, Living Works organization, so livingworks.org, which is a global organization that does trainings in safe talk and assist to train community members on how to respond to suicide in our community to prevent it. They have a great website, Living Works, just like it sounds, .org, and on that website, you can find all kinds of resources about suicide and suicide prevention. So those are, they're just a couple, but they're really valuable.
Well, thank you, Donna. Thanks for all this great information. It's a tough topic. It's tough to talk about, but we need to keep people safe.
Right. Thank you for having me.
And I thank you. I thank you for joining us. Thank you for being a part of this important topic. And if you need more information, you can always call the Life Crisis Hotline at 410-749-HELP. And that, again, the number is 410-749-4357. Or we also have a website at www.lifecrisiscenter.org. And we're also having a Facebook page. So lots of ways to connect with us. And I want to thank the PAC 14 for making all of this possible so that we could talk with you today. Thank you.